Power Up Gaming, the only destination you need for retro video games, consoles, and accessories. Want access to exclusive specials? Like us on Facebook.
Okay, so it's been a while since we've done a video, but thanks for joining us. So what we have here, and it's going to be very, very hard to show you, is we have a Colecovision that has a damaged controller port number 1. So what we're going to do is go in there, remove the main board, desolder the port, put a replacement port, which we're going to pull from another non-working system, and then test it out, make sure it works perfectly. So first thing we're going to do is take a look at it, and I'll try and show it to you, but probably can't. So it's actually this controller port right over here that's the issue, and a couple of the pins are pretty damaged. So that's what we're going to be tackling. Now, Colecovision systems are a pain in the ass to actually open. Very easy to take out the screws and everything, but it's a matter of actually getting the top case off of the system. So we're going to start by removing the main screws. I go all the way around the outside of the system here. Just going to remagnetize my screwdriver here. See if we can get some of these screws actually out of the system. There we go. Okay, so now the screws are taken out, the easy part's done. It's a matter of trying to open this thing. Now this thing will fight you at every single turn, trying to get it open. Did get them all? Oh, actually I missed one. Let's go back and get that extra screw. So this thing will fight you at every single moment, trying to get it open. And it has to do with the front port. So this nice Coleco front bezel is always the issue with opening one of these guys up. Sometimes they open up perfectly, other times it's an absolute pain. And I always remember what the trick is, and then when it comes time to do it again, because I don't open these all the time, it's completely lost again. So you do have to be a little bit forceful in getting this open, but not too forceful that you're going to break anything. So half the bezel's open. Again, very hard to show it on camera because you actually have to put a little bit of brute strength in it. There we go. So now we have it separated. There we go. Okay. So the top piece is off. As you can tell, when you're looking inside, it's pretty much an empty box. There's not much to this thing. The pain part is that this shield here, and actually just to let you know, that is our reset button, which actually will go right there afterwards. So we can take those off. We'll put those with the casing. Now when you're looking at this, you're like, great, there's screws on it. But there is more to it. There's actually a grounding braid here that's soldered on, which we'll have to deal with in a minute. But we'll take out the visible screws here. There's one more over here. And then we'll remove that soldering braid, or the soldered braid. And then back here in this corner here, I think there's actually more solder points than even those ones normally. But this one's going to be a little easier. So one thing to keep in mind when you're actually desoldering this solder braid on the side, you can either take it off the main board or you can take it off from this point, but what you're going to want is a pair of pliers to hold it with. The solder braid will get extremely hot. And you know what? I'm going to do it the other way. Okay, so now this board actually should come out once those screws are off. That'll give us more access to it, but okay. So if we take off this one screw here, holding it to the main board, pretty sure we can actually desolder it with it out of the system, but is there one more screw in the bottom corner there? No, that's out. That's out. What am I forgetting? Okay, what we're going to do is to attempt to take off this corner here. There's a solder blob just on the corner here, which solders it down. Okay, that's off. What we'll do is we'll take it off the board, just because it's probably going to be easier. There we go. So, that is off. Like I said, this should have came off beforehand, but there's no screws holding it down. Oh, look at that, right in the middle. So this board's a little different than some of the other ones I have, which may be an issue with trying to salvage a port, but we'll take a look. Okay. That just pulls right out. Okay, so now we can get rid of the bottom casing. One thing to make note of, this heatsink here, in a lot of cases when you actually open your system, you'll notice that this heatsink is actually not even attached. This thing kind of rattles around and everything else. It's the main processor that actually runs the system. This will be in your RAM. If this does come off, you can actually use a little bit of like a ceramic thermal paste. That's the word I'm looking for. You can actually use a little bit of ceramic thermal paste and use that across the actual processor itself and reattach the actual heatsink. Push that down into place, and that should set quickly and allow you to actually reattach that fine. Usually, I mean, once it's been on there for about an hour or so, it sticks on really well, and that's what I tend to do. So this is the controller port here, and there's a couple bent pins which you probably can't see too well. I still can't see well. But what we're going to do is we're going to take that off. So when you're actually looking at the port itself, there is a... Actually, I'm wondering if they're messing around with the port. I noticed that there's actually a solder point there. It's almost been removed, not making good contact. So that could have been one issue they had with the port to start with, and they're messing around with it and ended up bending the pins. But regardless, we're going to take that off. We're going to get it off a replacement one, and then reattach it down. So the easiest way to do this is with a soldering or desoldering gun, but there is other tips or other methods you can use, solder suckers, soldering braid. The first thing you want to do is, this system is extremely old, and the solder on these pads is leaded solder from way back when with no flux, no nothing. Most of the stuff I use now is also leaded, but what you're going to want to do is actually refresh the solder and really melt it on there, the new solder on there. That'll allow you to desolder it a little bit easier. This is flux-centered solder. So there is flux in this solder, and it just loosens up the old soldering points and make it a lot easier to desolder it once you put the fresh stuff on there. Okay, that should save us a little bit of time. So, it should be warm, almost. We're going to crank this up. Since it's an older board, it'll absorb a lot more heat, and it'll take a lot more heat to actually get it desoldered than a lot of the newer controller ports and things like that. So I got the heat up a little bit more than normal. And we'll just get rid of solder that's on these. Around these one more time here. Okay. So when you're actually wiggling this back and forth, you should see the connections actually move from the actual pins. That'll let you know which ones are actually freed up and which ones aren't. It seems like I got a few more stubborn ones. So we'll try with the solder sucker once more, and I'll pull it away from the actual pad. And those, I think, are wiggling now. Okay, so there's the old port off. So that's perfect. And those pads all look good. No breaks in them or anything, which is perfect. Just going to remove a little bit of solder blob that I put on there. Actually, it's connected to that point anyway, so no big deal. Okay, so there we have the old one off. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause for a second while I try and find a replacement system here that's a non-working system. And then we'll pull the port off that one and then transfer it to this one. What I recommend doing, since this is the good board, is make an actual mark on the board. If you're anything like me and like, you know, using the wrong board or getting the two mixed up, a good way to do is just put a mark on the actual system, so you know that this one's the good one because it's got the check mark on it. So I'm just going to pause for a second and we'll be back, and I'll grab a replacement board. Okay, so here we have the secondary system that we're going to tear down. This one has problems with the RAM modules anyways, so we're going to strip it down for a few different components, but won't be covering the full strip down in this video. What we're really looking at stealing off this, just to give you a rundown, is the ROM that actually stores the CMOS information, or the CMOS chip. We're going to steal the memory chips because those are known to fail. And then we'll steal the ports and power connectors and things like that off the actual main board before we dispose of the board afterwards, just so we have spare parts for future jobs, like this one. I could have used a controller port off of it. A lot easier if you have them all stripped off and in a bin, marked Coleco parts. Saves a lot of time in the future. Okay, so we pulled all those screws, same as the other one. Now we got to fight with this to get it open again. Verify that all the screws are gone. 6, yep, perfect. And of course it snapped right back in. There we go. So, top piece, bottom piece we'll end up keeping, just in case we find another kind of fugly system or something that we want to take it apart. We're going to do the same thing here. Remember I was mentioning about the solder braid and the solder points and everything else being different? This one is completely different than the one we just opened. As far as the heat shield, or the, not the heat shield, but the RF shielding is concerned. So we've got this screw in here. We don't have that stupid braid thing. Got another screw at the back corner here. Then we've got that one solder point right over here, which is a pretty big one, so it will require quite a bit of heat. Somebody had asked me before, when I actually go to pick up my soldering iron, what the actual beep is. On this unit here, we use a Heiko, which one is this? FM203, which is a dual soldering station, and with this one here it actually goes into standby mode, so when you actually put the soldering gun back in the holder it goes into standby and reduces down the temperature to not burn out your bit, where you can leave this on for hours and not have a problem with it. Otherwise you have to turn off in between because it runs at full heat, you'll burn out your tip and have to replace tips faster. So this is the Heiko FM203 that we use. Okay, so that part I'm actually going to get rid of, because I've got a whole crap ton of those. So when you're looking at the main board again, we'll end up pulling most of the RAM modules off there. We'll end up pulling the 2 controller ports, the main processors and ROMs, or CMOS, we'll end up pulling those too. There's not much else above and beyond that between the RAM modules and everything that we'd actually want off of here. Yeah, I mean, we'll end up keeping the controller port or the power port just in case there's a problem with one of those in the future. But there's really not much else on the system that we can actually make use of in a future time. So that one was really on there. Okay. Take that whole thing off, get the bottom piece out of the way. Once again, we're going to remove the actual controller port, so you can skip ahead if you don't want to see me remove it again. I'll zoom in for the guys that do want to see it. Okay, so it doesn't matter which controller port, they're both identical, just wired up differently. And we're going to try it without actually putting the other solder on, just to see if my theory of applying solder actually does work. I know what the answer is. Give me a second. I think we're almost clogged here. Okay, so I'm just going to stop for a second and deal with my soldering gun. I'll be back. So, soldering guns are great when they actually work and they don't get clogged up on you. This one's a good one, but I need to actually replace the filter in it, so it's not getting as much air through it which means it gets clogged a little easier. So we'll go over those ones we just did. Well, because it wasn't properly sucking out the solder anyways. And I can already see, like, it's doing an okay job. It may actually free up the port, but there's still a lot of residue of solder. So we'll see. Well, it looks like it's making off. So it does make it easier. I can guarantee you it makes it easier to actually, you know, remove it ahead of time. But I mean, it did remove it. Sorry, apply new solder to the actual the pins first off to make it more pliable, easier to work with. It does work. It is a great theory, and it's one I use all the time. Even though it did work there technically. Okay, so we have the replacement port, and this one looks good. All the pins are nice and clean. So what we're going to do is just apply it back to the holes. See if we can get it situated in there. It's always going to be one pin that's going to be a pain in the ass to get in there. There we go. Okay, so that is now on. All the pins are protruding nicely through the holes. Wow. Look at that, nice focusing. It's way too much silver on the bottom of this board, causing reflection off there. But anyways, all the pins are now showing there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run around all the pins and just get that soldered in. Maybe we can use this to create some leverage for it so you can actually see something. Okay, that will work. Harder for me to see it, but pretty basic. Soldering job. Nothing exactly complex here. There we have it. And what I'll do is I'll just clean off those solder points just so I can take a better look at them. I'm picky when it comes to my soldering. So I always want to make it look as good as I possibly can to make sure those connections are perfect. Just gonna take a quicker look here. Perfect. Look better than the originals. Nice and shiny. Okay. So now we have the replacement port on there. It's sitting nicely. Pins are nice and straight, so everything's perfect on it. We can go ahead and reassemble the system. So reassembly the same way it actually was taken apart. So the system, reset, and everything else goes to the front. There's also, I'm just going to zoom out here. So at the front of the system here, there's this little port which has to go through. And then this cable actually gets situated around. There's a peg underneath that it gets tucked behind. You know what, I'm going to put these in front because I don't like them behind. Okay, so the first screw on this one is the one in the center. Back into position there. Okay, then we have the heat shield with added glaze. Okay, so the heat shield, so there's one screw there. It's the back corner screw that needs to be in there ahead of time on this one. And the other ones get attached to the other one. Okay, so we'll get this braid back in place. And as mentioned before, you don't want to be grabbing this braid with your hands. So, use a pair of pliers. Common sense. Okay. Braid's back in place. RF shielding back in place there. Resolder on this corner. Takes a while to melt. I'm actually going to apply a little bit of fresh solder. Okay, so that one's attached there. We're going to put the other screws in the casing just to hold it, for the RF shield to hold it in place. through the RF shielding here. Nope, that one's for the case. Okay. So we got all the screws back in there. Next we just need to close her up. It goes together a lot easier than it goes apart. Reset button. Power button. Okay. Usually it goes together easier than it comes apart. Almost back together. There we have it. That's just the trapdoor on the front, the expansion slot that's sliding back and forth. Okay, last thing we have to do is we're going to throw away the old port and we'll put the 6 screws back in that hold this thing together. I'm not going to go through the testing. This was a pretty basic repair anyway, so I don't think I need to show anybody the actual testing of it and everything. Coleco has built-in CMOS, so as soon as you turn it on and everything else, it has like a built-in operating system that'll show you the Colecovision sign and everything. And then as soon as you put the game in, it'll recognize the actual game. But regardless, testing is extremely easy. We just need to make sure that the port's actually working fine. And we use a test cartridge for that one. Okay. So there you have it, disassembly of the Coleco, replacement of the game port. While we're in there, we could have done a lot of other things like pulling the RAM modules and everything. What we will be getting into in the future is actually replacing RAM modules and actually doing an upgrade on the RAM modules. These RAM modules run extremely hot, and that's the reason why they fail a lot very often. It's multiple voltages that are controlled through the RAM modules, and the future upgrade is actually going to be to replace all those RAM modules with a single voltage RAM module that runs a lot cooler, and will take care of any of the issues with memory modules. So stay tuned for that. If you haven't liked or subscribed to our videos before, please like and subscribe to this one. If you have any questions, concerns, post it below. Thanks for watching.